Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to, I think, off the top of my head, episode 29. So nearly 30. Off the top of my head, I was pretty sure that whenever we were talking about this last time, it was episode 28. I think.
It was. Yeah, we made a big deal.
We did make a big deal about it, which to a certain extent, I'm also kind of like, it's 28 hours of content we've managed to come up with. And 28 hours of content that you've managed to stay around and listen to. Yeah. Right, so let's cracking right on into it. So we'll get into the beer of the week. The beer of the week this week is the Panhead Quick Change XPA.
Yes, it is.
Pale Ale.
And the X stands for extra.
It stands for extra. So this is down in Upper Hutt there. So we're sticking with the Wellington beers.
We are.
The Wellington craft beers. So, Anthony, what are you thinking about the Panhead?
I'm actually really enjoying it.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Yeah.
How did I know you were going to go for the...
James, all you have to do is reference the previous 27 episodes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. To find out,
No, I am.
You can always write a script. Yeah,
I am.
Yeah. It's very different. So it's very different to a number of the other beers that...
It's very tangy.
It is. It's dare I say it, almost fruity. Like it's hoppy. Like and normally Anthony and I are not. We don't really enjoy very hoppy beers. Yeah. But this particular beer, like the sort of sweet fruity taste, sort of mitigates that whole really hoppy taste to it. So it sort of tastes very clean, very fresh. Those sorts of things. Again, sort of beer, I'm not going to say it's very drinkable, but the sort of beer that I could see myself drinking, like warm summer afternoon, like sitting outside on the deck. It's really hot. You just want something to quench the thirst. That sort of stuff. I reckon this is probably a pretty good shout. And at 4.6%, it's as far as craft beers go, it's a relatively low sort of percentage of alcohol, which is pretty good.
It advertises itself as being a pale ale that's not going to ruin you, or kind of thing. And I like that. And I like the fact that they've sort of toned it back a bit. Yeah.
It's not that really smack you in the face kind of like, because sometimes with craft beers you get a little bit of that, how do I say this? Like it's they feel like they've really got to go for that over the top, kind of hit you in the face with the flavor,
we're a craft
the
beer.
hops, yeah. So that's right. Yeah,
they've done very, very well.
I think so.
The balance is there. And, I really enjoy it.
So on the only scale that matters, Anthony, what are you going to give the Panhead?
I think I'm going to give it a 7.5.
A 7.5. Nice. Yeah. Good solid score. Yeah. I think I'm going to go for a solid 7 for the Panhead. A very enjoyable beer. Again, probably not in my wheelhouse, so not something that I would normally sort of drink, but really enjoyable. Really enjoyable.
No, I really like it. Yeah.
Cool. So, what's on top?
What is on top?
So we were talking a little bit this week about what we want to talk about this week.
And by this week, James means today.
So, actually, bizarrely, funnily enough, I sometimes find whenever we're doing the podcast, I sometimes find that the what's on top section is actually the hardest section for us to think about in terms of what we're going to talk about. And it's not because we don't have lots of things that we'd like to talk about, but there are lots of issues that, for varying reasons, we sort of feel probably aren't appropriate to talk about, or we'd be a little bit biased about talking about, that sort of stuff. And especially with a lot of stuff that's happening in the news at the moment, there's lots of sort of things that I'd be a little bit biased about in my talking about it, or maybe a difficult conversations to have just in a general kind of friendly chat, like, which is what we kind of try and keep this podcast sort of being. So we had a bit of an idea about where to go this evening, and something that we're both very, very passionate about. We thought we'd talk a little bit about music and a little bit about the music that has shaped our lives, and how music taste and things like that can change and change over time, and how quite often the music that you listen to is a product of when you grew up, where you grew up, all of those sorts of things. So I'm going to pass over to Anthony, and Anthony's kind of going to explain a little bit about like the format that this is going to take, how we're going to go about talking about this.
So how we're going to go about this is that we're going to break this up into 5-year increments. So basically we're going to talk about the music we listened to when we were 5. And this can be an album, or it can be a song, or it can be an artist, or whatever music consumed you at that age. We're going to go age 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on.
Yeah.
So James has 2 extra ones. Then
I have a couple of extra ones. Yeah.
And and basically the idea of this is to see how it's sort of to get an idea of our music tastes as we grow older and what we experienced. Yeah. And I think it's a really nice way of looking at, because you're always going to have favorite bands, but at a certain age, something really touched you and influenced you going forward. So that's what makes this really exciting. So, first of all, I'm going to pass the baton to James and say,
thank you.
James,
I thought you were going to go for this,
age 5.
Age 5. Okay, so at age 5, this would have been, I was just sitting there doing some quick maths in my head.
87.
It's going to be 87.
Yeah.
Now, being the age that I am and the ancient, venerable man that I am,
36.
age 5 is a long, long time ago. And I'm really trying to remember. I was sort of thinking about this as we were talking about this a little bit. I was really trying to remember back that young and what really I was listening to at that point in time. And as much as I could sort of reach back, I don't know. Like I can't say with absolute certainty that this is what I was listening to, and this is what I was sort of thinking about. And if I look back at sort of my earliest memories of being aware of music, for me, it was probably Michael Jackson. So it, 80s Michael Jackson's riding the absolute wave of being the king of pop. He is absolutely infallible. You have Thriller and all of those wonderful things that have come out. The movie Moonwalker has come out, and that was probably if I have to say that, like, there was something that I probably listened to over and over again, and I have this memory of watching Moonwalker the movie and having my parents rent it out from video stores. Those existed back then. Renting that video out over and over again. I mean, we must have rented out that video hundreds of times, like, and watched that whole thing, and I really bought into it. I loved Michael Jackson, loved Smooth Criminal, loved those to me were just the coolest things whenever I was about that age. That's probably the first thing I was really aware of at that time.
So do you think that probably, because if there's one thing you can say about Michael Jackson is that he was an incredible performance artist. Do you think that he probably sowed the seed for performance arts, because he's very much a enigma in that he's very much about the performance, about...
Well, you look back to Michael Jackson, you look back to all of that sort of stuff. I mean, Michael Jackson sort of almost single-handedly created the music video in terms of what we think of as the music video now.
Well, he
outside of live perform, like, just here's a video of the band playing.
Well, he was the first major MTV music video, and the reason for that was that they finally MTV, a little bit of history, but. Before Michael Jackson, MTV wouldn't play black artists on their channel, and then Michael Jackson got so big that they could no longer ignore him. So they finally played Michael Jackson big time on MTV, and then they went huge.
And Michael Jackson, like, do you know what's really weird about Michael Jackson? I think is that he sort of transcends, and again, we're talking at this period of time. So this is before any allegations of anything else, regardless of whether you want to believe it or not or whatever. He transcends that. Like, he was so much bigger than, you know, sort of being a African American performer. Like, he was just, he almost existed outside of any kind of musical kind of pigeonhole or any kind of racial pigeonhole, or he was just, he was massive. Like, like, it's hard to describe quite how big he was to people like that now. Like, I don't know, like, I would struggle to think of another band or another performer now that's as big as Michael Jackson was in the 80s.
There's no equivalent.
No, he was massive. I mean, Michael Jackson was, I mean, the best example or the best comparison I could probably make is Michael Jackson was to the 80s what the Beatles were to the 60s. Like, he was just this unstoppable creative force in the 80s, and everybody was listening to Michael Jackson. So that's probably the earliest sort of thing I can think of. So we've just had a light or something. Yeah, we've just had a light or something blow here at Esoterica HQ.
Was it a spark?
We'll cut this out.
Okay, I was just going to keep going.
Must have been that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, give us your meme review, Clap.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest that I can think of. Or the most, the earliest thing I can remember. Yeah. So I'm going to throw it back to you now and go, okay, five. What was it for you when you were 5?
It's really funny because when I was 5, between the ages of 5 and 10.
So this must be what? You're 10 years younger, so it must be 97.
97, which is an incredible, incredible year for music. You had... What did you have in 97? You had Massive Attack, you had Radiohead, you had Spiritualized, you had the Spice Girls.
Massive Attack.
I loved the Spice Girls in 97.
Yeah.
So when I was 5, and between the age of 5 and 10, I had so my parents gave me a stereo. And this was a pretty beefy thing. So this had CDs, could play CDs and cassettes. And back then, CDs, that was a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
This was a meaty, and it had all the the equalizers and things, and so what I had was a cassette collection from my parents, and one of the cassettes was a sampler cassette, and I remember this because it was a sampler of like a compilation that was trying to sell you another cassette. So and it had hits like
singles,
singles. So like from it had a compilation of like Journey, like I Wanna Know What Love Is, and it had White Wedding by Billy Idol, and basically all these 80s
I was like
basically 80s power ballads.
Yeah.
And I at age 5 I loved 80s power ballads.
Yeah.
80s power ballads.
I'm still a bit of a sucker. I'm still a bit of a sucker for an old 80s power ballad.
Yeah, it still sort of hits me, and so it was basically that. And you're very much at that age. You're very much, I think, determined by what your parents either let you listen to or what they and,
they're listening to themselves.
So it's very much Billy Idol and Journey and all those 80s sort of Eurythmics and all that kind of thing.
The Eurythmics.
Yeah. So it was that. It was sort of that hangover from the 80s, and I was catching up. I was learning, and
Do you know what I also thought was, I loved whenever I was younger, was Roxy Music.
Music.
Oh,
because I'm gonna
inadvertently
I'm gonna talk about them, but like Roxy Music, of course, were late 70s, early 80s, and of course, the most prolific member of that band would split off, and that was Brian Eno. He would go on to do other things like ambient music and produce albums and things. So Roxy Music to me is
I love Roxy Music. I also love some Roxette as well.
Yes, going back even further, going back even earlier,
Yeah.
But very, very good.
All right, now
Right.
I'm going to jump
10.
in and take the initiative here and go 10. You're going to go
10.
for you're going to go first for 10.
Okay.
So for this is 2002 for you.
2002.
2002.
So at this point, I still wasn't listening to current music. I wasn't actively seeking out current music. So for me, when I was 10, I was listening to Queen.
Yep.
Big time, I was listening to Queen. And
This is going to be interesting. Yeah.
R.E.M. So like the first album that I truly loved, and that I consider to this day one of my favorite albums ever. Was Automatic for the People by R.E.M. So, and that had Drive, it had Everybody Hurts, it had Man on the Moon, Find Me the River.
It's a great song.
And although, and it was R.E.M. at their 90s peak.
Yep.
And, but also it was when, a lot of rock, like a lot of 80s, sort of power ballad, like Bon Jovi and, oh goodness me. What else was I listening to? Like a lot of, that was when I first, 2002. This was a few years, so I'd gotten over like the whole Ricky Martin.
Yeah.
I was big into, a few years before, I was big into like Robbie Williams. To be honest, to this day still am. But 2002, I was starting to get into... that was the explosion of new metal.
Yeah.
So like,
really
I was starting to get into like Linkin Park.
Limp Bizkit had been around for a while.
Yeah.
Linkin Park was out there. Yep.
But a lot of classic stuff. So like R.E.M., I would say at age 10, R.E.M.'s Automatic for the People.
Yeah.
That was the album.
Yeah.
That I was. Yeah. That was. Yeah.
So really bizarrely, because obviously now we really get into the difference in age here, and so obviously Automatic for the People wasn't out whenever I was 10.
I think
it would have been pretty close.
Just come out. I think 92.
So we're talking 92.
Yeah,
so 92 I was 10. But bizarrely, one place that we actually share a weird similarity is Queen.
Yeah.
So I in and around this sort of period of time, I first became aware of Queen as a band, and that was through my father. And I still remember to this day, driving in the car with my father, and my father putting on Queen's greatest hits and turning the volume right up and being just like, there's some music you just have to listen to loud. Like, and that was Queen. Mine is a little bit weirder. So in and around this period of time, and so forgive me if I'm wrong if it's not exactly 92, but it's in and around the age of sort of being 10, 11, 12, and around there. I got into the Cranberries, released their debut album, with songs like Zombie and Linger and stuff like that on it. I got into the Cranberries. I got into Ace of Base, at the time, who were huge at the time. I got really into the Stranglers.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, and again, that's a throwback 70s, 80s, but like really into the Stranglers. Like my father again enjoyed the Stranglers, and it's still a band I really love. I'll go. Strange Little Girl, I think, is still one of the best songs out there. I love the Stranglers. Absolutely love the Stranglers. So I really got into the Stranglers. I started to become aware of metal whenever I was around that age. I started to become aware. I sort of transitioned a little bit out of like what you were sort of talking about it before with like the power ballads and sort of stuff like that into a little bit of metal, and that's going to come up a little bit later. But I was still very melodically driven at this period of time. I also got massively through the sort of this period of time, got massively into the Pogues. Rum, Sodomy and the Lash was the album that I got massively into by the Pogues. So it was always it was those big sing-along stuff, Queen, the Pogues, the Stranglers,
stadium rock,
big, sing-along stuff that had a good hook, like sing-along choruses. That probably was the thing. It's interesting to me that we're talking about, and this is the kind of cool thing for us, is that we're talking about 10 years apart the whole time here. So we're talking about 92 versus 2002.
Yeah.
And it interests me that Queen figures in there.
It
for
does,
us both,
yeah.
at sort of this period of time, Queen becomes...
It's absolutely universal. It
becomes a staple for both of us at this period of time. I find that interesting.
It is.
All right, moving on. 15.
Yeah.
Right.
Have I done 10?
No, you've done 10, so you've done 90. We're talking 2002, so you're now up to 2015, 2000. Oh, no,
Where am I?
Yeah,
Where am I now?
you're up to 15.
15.
So
yeah,
2007.
2007. Oh, wow. Okay, so that was 2007 was a big time. So between the ages of 13 and 15, I was consuming music so incredibly. Between those ages, I was listening to... So I started out listening at... really early on, I was listening to, like, grunge. So I was really, really into your Pearl Jams, your Mudhoneys, your Soundgardens, your... Hugely into Nirvana. But...
in 2007, this is amazing.
Well, you got to remember as well, because Nirvana... had just released the album that had their first new song in like 20 years. So the You're Right. They had the Greatest Hits album.
Yeah.
So I was being introduced to Nirvana.
Do you know, this is really funny
because I was downloading it on LimeWire.
There's going to be so many parallels here, bizarrely. But
that's so weird.
Which is really weird.
Yeah. Yep. So like Pearl Jam and all that angsty teenage. So it's universal, that angsty teenage sort of. And this is when I started getting into the Beatles and to all sorts of music. So this is when I started getting really invested in music.
Yeah.
And then around 15, I discovered an album called Selected Ambient Works, 87 to 92, and that was by Aphex Twin.
Yeah.
And that absolutely just... It really changed the way I thought about music, and it introduced electronic music. Because up until then, I'd been listening to, and my parents, it had all been rock ballads and rock, and I'd never been seriously introduced to electronic music. So to hear an album that really shifted the way I thought about music, the way I felt music, and yeah, there's definitely crossover here. And so, and then... Of course, I listened to Aphex Twin Selected Ambient Works 2. And then the big album for me that really shifted everything was an album called Try Repeat by Audica. Actually, I recently, for the first time, it was out of print for ages on vinyl, and I finally got it. In its beautiful...
it's taken pride of place here.
It's something like Pantone color, like 483C, and it's the ugliest color in the world. It's the same color they use to wrap
cigarette packets.
Packets. Yeah, it's like disgusting. It's they so purposely did that because they were like, "This is industrial and horrible." But the album sounded cold and warm at the same time. It sounded like I'm pretty sure as Richard James who is Aphex Twin said, it's like standing in the middle of a factory at night and hearing all the cogs turn around you. It's like it somehow is the most beautifully... it's melodic, but it's cold and it's steel-like, and every now and then you get warm moments, and that makes it so beautiful. And that's when electronic music, for me, really opened. Yeah. So that's when I started listening to, like, Boards of Canada, all those Warp Records greats. So, 15 was a huge... 2007, huge year for me for music. That's when it all blew open, and... Yeah, but James.
So I'm going to come back, and this is what's really interesting here is, again, there's so many parallels, because I think 15 is obviously, especially that time, 15, 16, in and around there, is when music does explode for you, and you start experimenting with your own taste and what your own taste is, and, in some ways, I feel incredibly blessed in some ways that I think I was the right age for a lot of things at the right time. I was 15 in 1997. So, grunge was king. So, 1997, for me, at 15, was very much... And this is why I laughed when you were talking about this before. It was very, very much Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins.
They were on the wane since then.
Yeah, but Nirvana was on the wane. Yeah.
Well,
to
be fair, it'd only been a few years.
Yeah, it still felt. I have this thing, and I have this thing when I talk to people about music now. I have this thing about whenever I was a kid versus kids now, right? And their access to music. There were albums whenever I was 15 that everybody knew, and songs that everybody knew, though every lyric to that song. Smells Like Teen Spirit. What do you call it? Enter Sandman by Metallica. Like they were just anthems, and I guess at that stage it still felt close enough that the grunge movement, because again, while they were potentially on the wane in places like America, the grunge movement hadn't been that long in other places. It really felt like a generational thing. It really felt that was the music of my generation. That really disenfranchised kind of we felt it, if you know what I mean. Like, so for me, it was at 15. It was very definitely Metallica. Huge into Metallica when I was 15. Huge into Nirvana. Liked me some Smashing Pumpkins. Loved me some Pearl Jam. It was in and around this time, and you'll have to forgive me, 97. It might be a little bit later. It might be 16, 17, but I'm pretty sure it's in and around this time that I discovered Silverchair and Frog Stomp. That first album got played on repeat for forever and ever. That really was Slipknot starts to become a thing. Mudhoney, bizarrely, and this is why I laughed that there's so many parallels. But that was really it. I became aware in and around this time of the Britpop movement. But bizarrely,
it was coming to a wane then, eh? Yeah.
Bizarrely in 97, Britpop wasn't huge for me, so I wasn't massively into it. I would become a fan of it later on, but in 97, it wasn't where I was at.
It was definitely dying by then.
Yeah, but even then, it wasn't really where I was at. Weirdly enough, it's around 15 that I discovered the Beatles. And for me, it was a CD, and it was Sgt. Pepper. So the Sgt. Pepper CD, which I have, is probably the CD that I played the most. I really got into the Beatles. I really got into metal. I really got into grunge, that sort of stuff, and that's sort of where I was at 15. I laugh a bit about you talking about electronic music at 15 because for me, that's going to come up. That comes up between 15 and 20. So for me, electronic music really hits me as I get to about 18. And this was the big wave. And again, I was just in the right place, right time, right age, right time.
Yeah, you're in the middle of the big beat movement.
This hits with the rave movement, with I was 18 or so, 17, 18 when Gatecrasher becomes a big thing. That big British electronic music thing becomes a big thing. Techno, Darude Sandstorm. We laugh at it now, but that came out when I was 17. 18 and it was huge at the time, and that kind of club techno rave kind of stuff starts to become big for me whenever I'm sort of hitting 17, 18, but certainly before that period of time, 15, 16, 17, for me it's metal. It's grunge. It's that kind of much harder, much heavier kind of stuff. With the exception, bizarrely, of the Beatles, which kind of just sort of slotted in there, and for a very long time. And actually, funny enough, we'll come to this a little bit later. But for a very long time, Sgt. Pepper. So Sgt. Pepper was really the only Beatles album that I had listened to, or that I listened to, and for years and years I didn't go and listen to really much of the rest of the Beatles, except for the Sgt. Pepper album, which was sort of me up until then. Right, okay, we're heading into interesting territory now, because we're 20s. Getting into 20. 20. So for you, this is
7 years ago.
2012.
Holy shit.
2012, yeah.
Okay, so in 2012, goodness me. Okay. So again, this is a huge year for me. So
another halcyon year for music, 2012.
Yeah, it was a huge year. So at this point, I was listening to Flying Lotus. I was listening to John Mouse. I was listening to Grizzly Bear. I was listening to Broken Social Scene, who had released albums years before, but I'd finally gotten into. A lot of indie stuff like Grizzly Bear and Duty Projectors and bands like that I finally got to see live, but at the time had been around for a while, a couple of years. And so again, though, I was really into electronics, so I was listening to a lot of Warp Records bands. I was listening to a lot of like Boards of Canada, Flying Lotus, Aphex Twin, Audica, Black Dog. But a lot of music that this is when I was just listening to everything. I was just absorbing everything. John Mouse, who to this day, one of my favorite ever albums, We Must Become the Pitiless Censors of Ourselves, which is a really wonderful sort of synth pop album.
I love me some synth pop.
Yeah.
I don't hear enough synth pop.
No.
I like me some synth pop.
And he incredible. Like the whole album's incredible. And he released it in, I think, 2012 actually. And a lot of rap, like I was listening to a lot of like Nas and Kanye West and Jay-Z, and at the time I think like Tyler the Creator and Earl Sweatshirt and a lot of stuff then, and like huge, like I can't compress, but I think from memory, my most listened to songs of that year were like Extell by Aphex Twin and Uto by Audica. And a lot of soundtracks as well. But huge. I consumed a huge amount of music that year, and again, it was no longer like I'm listening to this genre. It was no longer. I'm no longer
tied to this is what I listen to.
Yeah, I'm not listening to heavy metal. I'm listening to all of this huge range of music, and it was electronic, it was indie, it was acoustic, it was heavy, it was a lot of huge mix of things. Yeah.
So 20 for me, we're talking 2002. This is probably, and I'm sort of going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to go from 2000 to 2002. So we're sort of talking 18 to 20 in and around there. And I would agree with you. It's hard to define, because at this period, my music taste was probably at this period the most diverse. And that had to do with where I went to school, stuff that was popular at the time, things I was listening to. So between that ages, rap became a big thing for me, gangster rap. And this was, I mean, you had some bangers of albums released. This was 2001 by Dr. Dre. Eminem released his first album. Gangster rap was really becoming very mainstream. Through that, I got into Nas, you know, all of that sort of stuff, which is funny. Again, we seem to be sharing some weird parallels here. On the flip side of that, and on the sort of the complete flip side of that, which is really weird, I sort of moved a little bit away from heavy metal at this particular point in time. But previously to that, I'd been listening to a lot of Manson, Metallica, that sort of stuff. And I moved into, I really enjoyed the new wave of punk. So I got really into like NoFX, Goldfinger, all of those sort of new wave punk bands. I got a little bit, not hugely, but it was certainly there on the periphery. I got a little bit into songs, you know, of the new metal variety. So, you know, Linkin Park,
Limp Bizkit.
Limp Bizkit. Yeah. You know, you couldn't, like, at that period of time, you couldn't avoid new metal. Because it was...
I'm certainly.
It was there.
I downplayed.
Like,
I downplayed.
Stained, all of those kind of like new metal bands.
I loved those bands growing up.
And at the time, they were really influential. I would say that in 2002 was when I became, or you know, in and around between 18 and 20 was when I became much more aware of New Zealand music as well. That's when I really started listening to bands like... this might seem really weird to say, but that's when I started listening to bands like Crowded House and Split Enz and, you know, the Dance Exponents and, you know, that sort of stuff was in and around that kind of period.
Those bands I listened to, because I used to have... before I had that big stereo I talked about, I had a little... So I had this portable TV thing. It had like a little screen. It was black and white. And it was obviously made like decades before I was born. And it had a cassette player up the top. You could go... And I had Split Enz. So I listened to like 6 Months in a Leaky Boat, Icy Red, like Split Enz, Chris Knox, The Chills, like all those bands like in this thing. Like,
so
that my parents
I'd never really heard a lot of that before. And I was exposed to that largely when I started university. And I got really into like Crowded House... And that sort of stuff. So again, I suppose that melodic thing sort of carried through. It's also the period of time when I became involved or interested in things like ICP and like just really weird out there. I moved very much away from electronic music at this period of time. Like, so in my early 20s, I'd moved away from that. The rave scene was on the decline. That, you know, that whole kind of English rave scene thing wasn't seen as being that cool anymore. It had moved away from that into like the new punk scene, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So I moved much more down that. Through that new punk scene, like through the, you know, NoFX and Goldfinger and stuff like that, I started to discover older bands like, you know, Sex Pistols, the Buzzcocks, the Dead Kennedys, you know, those kinds of, you know, punk bands. And I kind of really got into that punk sort of thing probably when I was in my early 20s. Yeah, okay.
Nice.
So we've got one more for you, haven't we, in terms of decades?
Yeah.
So,
and then it's the end.
You're up to 25, which is where have we just been? We've been 2002, so 2012, so we're 2017.
Oh my god. It's like 2 years ago. It's like nothing. It's nothing.
Where were you in 2017? So 2025, yeah? 2017.
So, 2 years
All
ago.
those massive years ago. Yeah.
So at that point, 2017. So I was, I think at that point a new Radiohead album had just come out. So that was the new A Moon-Shaped Pool had come out not that long ago, I think. So Carolina bought for me the collector's edition of A Moon-Shaped Pool.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. And it was all on vinyl and there was an art book and stuff. And it was the first album they'd done in years, and they were a huge band. I haven't even mentioned them yet, but like Radiohead were a huge band for me growing up.
Yeah.
And since 2007, in fact, before then, they were they were the first band that I really dove into, and I could tell you anything about them. And their new album finally came out, and it was incredible. And I had the pleasure of seeing them 5 years before in concert in 2012. In 2017, I was listening to a huge, a big variety. That was when I was listening to, I was listening to a lot of like Jay Dilla, who did a lot of like instrumental hip hop. So along the same vein of like DJ Shadow and things. And I was listening to like a lot of Talking Heads, who I'd been listening to a lot of the time, my whole life. Can, German krautrock, Throbbing Gristle, industrial band from the 70s, Kraftwerk, again from the 70s. A huge amount, like I don't even know where to begin. I was listening to so much music. LCD Sound System. Even though I was a big fan of them, like like literally a decade before. Like I was listening to them in high school. I'd rediscovered it. Like I was still listening to them in 2017. I was listening to LCD Sound System, Block Party, all those bands that were really big back then. And goodness me, what else? Like and a lot of new bands like Sun Kill Moon, Future Islands, who were really big in that year. Subtract, Twin Shadow, EMA, M83. Goodness me, M83 were huge then. Like I could go on forever and ever and ever about bands, but like there are so many bands that I could just like shout out. Like you know, and huge.
Well, and one of the things that we don't talk about a little bit is that a large amount or all of the records that are on the back wall here actually are yours. So like these are all bands that you have listened to or bought records for, you know, and that sort of stuff over that period of time, and stuff you've been listening to, and we have a huge range of vinyl to choose from in terms of the stuff that goes on our back wall. So you have an incredibly diverse music taste, and like listening to what you've said so far, like your taste in music has, as you've grown older, diversified. So just got bigger and bigger and bigger, which is why 2017 is such a hard year to pin down for you, because it's like there's so many things that you're listening to, and so many things that you're listening to now. Okay, so for me, 25, we're talking 2007. And again, I would say that my taste in music really diversified at this point. So 2007, by this stage I'd sort of moved away from the punk thing. I'd been there, done that. I'm going to try and for the sake of brevity kind of like pare down to like, you know, what were the sort of the biggest things on my radar at that particular time. I was a big fan of System of a Down at the time, and the stuff they were doing. It was probably at 25 I became really aware of the rest of the Beatles back catalogue. As weird as that sounds, that's when I started really getting into some of the other stuff like the White Album or Rubber Soul, or you know, those kind of albums, as distinct from like Sgt. Pepper. 2007, sorry, what else was I listening to in 2007?
It was an incredible year for music.
I know.
It was when Portishead released their third album.
Portishead, I was a big fan of Portishead.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of, you know, I sort of went backwards and listened to a whole heap of stuff. That's when I really became interested in the British music scene. And I became a big fan of Oasis, Blur, I really loved Massive Attack. I really loved Portishead. I loved Cake, Pulp, the Pixies. You know, those sorts of things I really discovered when I was probably 25. Like, you know, in and around there, I got massively into that kind of thing. Really, we're probably the big drivers for me. Like, you know, going back to that, and we were talking a little bit about this before. I'm a real sucker for that original band sound. I'm a real sucker for that 2-guitar like you know, band sound. Like it's probably the same sort of time I sort of really got into Guns N' Roses, and you know, like or you know, a lot of that, again, a lot of 80s hair metal I really got into. I really enjoyed bits and pieces by Stone Roses, Guns N' Roses, Skid Row, Scorpions, like, you know, like just that really over the top 80s, you know, sort of hair metal.
Stone Roses aren't hair metal though.
No, but do you know what I mean? Like,
I know
that,
what you
that
mean, though.
really
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
you
They
know,
fit into that.
early kind of, you know, Def Leppard, like, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Iron Maiden, all of that kind of thing. That over the top kind of rock sound, you know, I really got into. I now feel slightly weird because I've got another one to add, and we now move to because I'm
we
old.
now move to the 30. Yeah.
30.
Yeah.
And actually, do you know what's really funny about moving into my 30s? So we've gone from 2007. We're now talking about 2012.
Yeah.
Hit my 30s in 2012, and but bizarrely by this stage I'd met you. And you influenced my music taste, or things that I was listening to, or things that I was exposed to. Because as you've talked about with some of your musical, some of the stuff that you were listening to, was very, very different to some of the stuff that I was listening to, in my 30s. I wouldn't have said that my music taste changed a hell of a lot between 25 and 30. It wasn't that I was listening to a whole heap of really different stuff whenever I sort of hit 30 than I was whenever I was 25. And then I met you, and you introduced me to a lot of electronic music that I hadn't listened to before, and you sort of influenced me, or I started listening to a whole heap of stuff that I would now listen to a lot more. Like Boards of Canada was the first one that you really got me into.
Yeah, incredible.
Was Boards of Canada, and I'm going to sum up, sort of 30 and 35 in the same sort of chunk, so we don't have to do two different ones. But so we'll go from 2012, 2017 through that sort of period of time. But you got me massively into Boards of Canada, got me listening to stuff like the Decemberists, Spiritualized. Nick Cave, I discovered at this period of time, and really got into Nick Cave and that sort of stuff. I also went further back to like the Smiths. I discovered at this period of time. I massively I went back to some things that I'd listened to previously and really enjoyed. I got back into like the Stranglers, like
great band.
Massively got into Oasis, really love the Verve, that real kind of Britpop sound. That sort of thing has probably defined the majority of my 30s as I listen to music, and again, just that massive diversification. I suppose I've dropped off a lot of stuff. I don't listen to as much metal as I used to, don't listen to as much punk as I used to, or grunge. Again, it's funny, as somebody who grew up during the whole grunge movement and that sort of stuff, and to a certain extent was sort of at the right age for the grunge movement, it really was a thing. That was a time and a place. Like, if you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't go...
very of its time.
I wouldn't go back now and listen to Nevermind, for example, which I would have listened to over and over again whenever I was much younger. I wouldn't sort of by choice go back... If I had to listen to a Nirvana album, I'd listen to the Unplugged, the MTV Unplugged album, which is them basically doing covers of a whole heap of stuff.
Like Meat Puppets. Stuff. It's Meat Puppets and Bowie and but I mean,
I'd go back. But
even In Utero by Nirvana is incredible. But it's
But I wouldn't really get massively into the grunge thing, or like I'd listen to a bit of Pearl Jam every now and then, but Smashing Pumpkins and stuff, and like it doesn't hold the same sort of visceral enjoyment that I used to get from it.
I like the real chill, like when you say Smashing Pumpkins. Like for me, I'm like, I want to listen to 1979 by them, like the real chill stuff by them. But like Zero, I'm like,
and I think you start to appreciate a lot of the B-sides, or what were considered to be B-sides more rather than the singles. And it sort of solidified my taste in music, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started doing this podcast, in terms of whenever I was younger, I didn't really get into like concept albums and the idea of an album as a whole. Like I'd listen to singles and I'd be like, I like that song, whatever. And it's not till probably I was into my 30s that I was really like actually what I want to listen to an album that tells the story. And again, like I'll come back to Spiritualized, or I'll come back to the Decemberists, or you know, those kinds of bands whose albums you kind of have to listen to the whole album. You can't really just pull out a song and be like, I'm going to listen to that song. You kind of have to listen to the whole album. And so I've sort of gone a lot more down that track. And you've introduced me to like a lot of new music that I hadn't listened to before, that I really got into, and a lot more of that ambient stuff. Aphex Twin you introduced me to, Boards of Canada, you know, the Decemberists, Spiritualized. You know, all of those kinds of things you introduced me to, like, you know, which opened up those horizons again in terms of what what I listen to and what music can be. I think one of the things that we haven't touched on a little bit, and I was thinking about this before. Yeah. One of the things that we haven't touched on, and I guarantee for both of us this is a thing, is the influence that musical theatre had over that time. So so for example, like, and I didn't mention this because it wasn't something that I was sort of consciously aware of, but you know, for example, I can think of, you know, this is probably between the age of 10 and 15. I can remember, for example, the soundtrack for Les Mis being played like over and over and over again in the car. Like, Les Mis is still to this day probably one of the only shows that I know probably every single word to, every single incidental song, every single you know, because it was just played over and over again.
I think that's a problem, because I think with like with a show like Les Mis is that you grow up listening to it and you have a very strong idea of, and like I think you and I both grew up listening to the 10th anniversary edition.
Which to me is the canonical version of Les Mis,
and then later came the 25th anniversary. And see, I would like, in a perfect world, I would like to pick up elements of the 10th and 25th anniversary and slot them, but I think you grow up, and what ends up happening, especially when it comes to music and live music, is that you spend a lot of time having a certain idea about a song, and then you go see a band live, and it's different to what you expect. So, like for Les Mis, I have very, very strong opinions about how a song should feel and sound, and
like it's like to me, I'll come right back down to for me, Valjean. And this is probably the most pertinent example I can think of. Valjean has a very specific sound. It's that, you know, very soft, almost. You know, we parody it a little bit whenever we sing it. You know, that soft, sort of almost lispy. Who am I? Can I deny this man? You know, it's that dignity. It's dignity. Like, you know, it's that because that's how it was on the 10th anniversary, and that's to me, that's always
Carl Wilkinson.
That's always how Valjean will sound. Like, you know, and anytime I hear it differently, I struggle. The same thing with Eponine, who was very the vocal timbre was very bright and punchy. You know, and to me, that's always how it should sound, because that's what I grew up with, and so you know, there's that. The other thing that I haven't mentioned that was a big part of my life too was, and I'm going to use a catch-all term that I hate because it's not accurate, but like the influence of classical music and the influence of orchestral music and opera and things like that on my younger life, and listening to that, and that wasn't necessarily stuff that I chose to listen to, but was stuff that I was exposed to through what I was doing and stuff like that. And still to this day, I still think that some of that is phenomenal. So for example, I would say that, like, you know, the first movement of El Ghazi Mane Cello Concerto is still one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written. Like, you know, so there are all those kind of weird little tag-ons that you can put into outside of, like, you know, what you were listening to.
And it's crazy because, like, I just realized I didn't even touch on what my favorite album is or what my favorite like, because when I was 20 and before then in high school, like, my favorite to this day album of all time is an album called Loveless. By My Bloody Valentine. And it's shoegaze.
I see.
And,
I didn't even touch on shoegaze,
and again,
I love shoegaze.
yeah, and it's my favorite genre of music.
Okay, so okay, because we need to wrap this up. So
we do.
What I'm gonna do is to wrap this up. I'm gonna say to you, like right now. You're 27 and I'm 36. I want you to give me right now, at this period of time. I'm not gonna say favorite because favorite is it's hard.
Yeah.
But I want you to give me the album that you would listen to more than anything else at this, like right at this moment.
Jesus.
What if I said to you, chuck on an album, you know, just whatever you want to listen to, what would be your go-to? What is that album for you right now?
Is an evil question.
Okay, do you want me to give you some time to think about it? Because I've got mine sitting in my head.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so mine is that one.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Spiritualized, ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space.
Yeah.
Like, and that is still one of my favorite, like right at this moment, one of my favorite albums as a whole album. It is brilliant. Like, and again, not saying my favorite album, not saying like, you know, but is an album that I'm just like at this point of time, I'm like, I have a real thing.
You can listen to it over and over again.
I have a real thing for that album.
Yeah.
Like, so that would be it for me. So what do you reckon?
I would probably still go. I would go "Loveless" by My Bloody Valentine, and simply because it's such an incredibly layered piece of work. It's so beautifully produced. Kevin Shields spent years mixing it, and every time I listen to it, I hear something different. Yeah, and it's so incredibly perfect and wonderful, and there's so much depth, and every song is perfect, and I wouldn't grow tired of it because it's sort of a wall of sound you get, and yet there's melody in there, and it's beautiful. Yeah. There's something in there every single time you listen to it. So I feel like I actually don't think there's an album I've listened to more.
Okay.
To be honest.
So I'm going to ask you one more question. Okay. Which is. Again, I'm not saying favorite because favorite's the wrong thing because it depends on time, mood, you know, all those kinds of things, and you can have lots of. Band drops an album tomorrow. You're going to go out and buy it, like, you know, without listening to a single. You know nothing about this. It just comes out of nowhere. Band drops an album. You don't even listen to it. You're going to spend $40. $50, $60. You're gonna
Jesus,
buy.
how expensive is this album?
You're gonna buy.
Oh my god!
You're gonna buy.
What is it recorded?
You're gonna buy a first press vinyl.
Yeah.
Like. Yeah. Who is it?
Radiohead.
Cool.
Yeah, it's Radiohead.
Yeah. Oasis.
What about you? Really?
Yeah.
Even all these years later.
All these years later, I'd still be like, boom.
Yeah.
I'm buying that album. Like. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying they're my favorite band. Not saying, but they dropped an album tomorrow. That wasn't a. That
would
wasn't
you trust? Would you trust them to?
Yep. To be fair, that wasn't a greatest hits. That wasn't like here's a greatest hits compilation. Yeah. But dropped an album tomorrow. Yeah.
Wow.
I'd buy that album.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, and that's cool. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So moving on to Uncanny Valley. So
Uncanny Valley.
Moving on to Uncanny Valley, I need to get my phone out of my pocket. So I think due to time, I think we'll do one Uncanny Valley, Uncanny Valley this time. And actually, funnily enough, this one comes from Discord. So this is one that our audience has shared with us, and I laughed like an immature 15-year-old whenever I read this article because I thought this article was absolutely hilarious. So this article comes from E-Bomb's World, which is a relatively good news source.
E-Bomb's World? Yep. Are they still happening?
They are still happening.
Wow.
So, I thought this
I feel like I'm in 2006.
Yeah, I know, it's from a wee while ago. It's you know, but I thought this was hilarious. So, the title of this article is Scuba Diver is hospitalized after he tried having sex with a giant clam.
All right, here we go. Here we go.
A scuba diver is been hospitalized in Kau Hospital on the island of Hawaii after he inserted his penis into a giant clam while recreational diving. Sean, 22, was
I love it. It's like, and it's in the article. You can't read tone or anything. But you're like, Sean, 22. By the way.
Yep. He was transported to hospital after suffering from severe breathing complications, vomiting, extreme swelling, and low blood pressure. Doctors believe physical contact with the giant mollusk may have triggered his allergy to seafood. The scuba diver, whose condition has stabilized, said he inserted his penis inside the clam as a prank to impress his friend.
As a prank? Oh, it's just a prank, bro.
It's just a prank.
Just a prank, bro.
It was just a joke at first. My friend was filming, so I wanted to impress him and put my dick into the clam. But then it just wouldn't let go, he told reporters.
Well, did you impress him?
The amateur diver also admitted he was still hungover from the night before and had consumed GHB and ecstasy, which impaired his judgment at the time. No shit. It didn't hurt or anything. It felt warm and cozy inside the clam, but I was afraid my oxygen reserves were getting low. After eventually releasing himself from the clam, he developed a severe allergic reaction and was rushed to hospital. A doctor believes that the diver's body reacted to the digestive enzymes of the giant mollusk, which was possibly trying to digest the man's genitals at the time of the incident.
Oh my god.
He admits it's the first case of its kind he's seen in 22 years of practice. Allergies to seafood are fairly common and usually occur after ingestion of fish or shellfish, not after sexual intercourse with the shellfish, he told reporters.
Matter-of-factly. That is stunning. That is stunning.
I just love that decision-making moment where you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna whip it out. Like I'm scuba diving.
It's a prank.
You know, it's a prank.
And it's on.
But also, like,
for the bros, I'm doing it for the bros.
But I'm also like, is this no? But like, okay, so maybe I'm. I don't know. Maybe I'm.
You're not
naive here.
I'm gonna answer. You're not.
I know, but like, don't like when you're scuba diving. Right.
You're playing devil's advocate, but
yeah,
no.
but when you're scuba diving,
you
right?
can't justify it.
Like whenever I picture a scuba diver, I picture wetsuit. How are you getting you like if you put a wetsuit on? Like that's not a just you just whip it out and like like that takes quite a bit of planning and quite a bit of like.
That was me, by the way, reaching towards my upper back and pulling a zip down.
I love that this poor doctor is sitting there going, like, can you imagine going to the hospital and being like, so I have a shellfish, allergy. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. So, have you been in contact with shellfish recently? And he's like, well, actually, I stuck... I stuck my penis into a giant mollusk. Like...
And they're like, ha 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 ha, very funny.
But seriously
what happened? Like, no, really, I think, and I think the whole attitude of, see, I prefer when you read it, you make it sound really dignified. But in my brain, what I'm hearing is, and my friend said, like, it'd be a funny prank, and like, and then some video, and I just think, you fucking
yeah, but the other thing is I sit there and I go, like he was doing this to impress his friend. I'm like, if we were scuba diving together, if you stuck your penis in a giant mollusk, I'd be like,
you'd be so impressed.
You'd
be like,
you are you are a
you'd
muppet.
Be going, no, but this is what I mean.
What
like,
are you
and this
doing,
is what I mean. And
muppet.
Like this guy's friends, the fact that they were supposedly,
or he thought this was going to impress them.
That's what I mean. And it's like, you either need to get better friends or your judgment is awful. And you actually deserve to have mollusk dick. Mollusk dick. It's a new term.
Do you
Mollusk dick.
Do you know what I love too? Is that this doctor, right? The press come to him. This is a guy who's worked his entire career to get his entire life to get a medical degree. He's done 22 years worth of practice. And the paper comes to him and asks really dumb questions like, so have you ever had this happen before, where a guy's put his penis inside a giant clam? And he's like, honestly, no, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's what's going through his head. But to the paper, he's got to turn around and go, well, you see, normally people get allergic reactions by eating shellfish. I've never had this happen where somebody's tried to fuck a shellfish before and, like, it's developed an allergic reaction. Like, I mean, can you imagine just being that guy and going, this muppet? Like, just what were you thinking? So,
guys,
on the only scale that matters, Anthony, how likely are you to stick your penis into a giant mollusk?
I think about it. I think about a 2.
A 2? A slight possibility that you'd be like, yeah.
It would have to, like, the circumstances would have to be extraordinary.
There'd have to be wine and candles.
Like, it's
and,
been, like...
romantic music playing.
Yeah, there'd have to be, like, a nice meal and candles and maybe rose petals. And actually... Maybe some, like, sweet... Like, the conversation would have to be really sweet beforehand. Like,
it's playing some My Bloody Valentine in the background.
Yeah, the mollusk would have to have had Loveless, the 94 Creation Records analog recording of My Bloody Valentine playing on vinyl in the background. And also would actually just have to set up a really nice scene. Like, it would have to be...
Make you feel
really
wanted
comfortable.
and, like,
Wanted and comfortable. And,
Yeah.
It might happen. If the mollusk can guarantee these conditions, it could happen.
I am going to say,
Caroline, take note.
From my point of view, big fat 0.
Really?
It's never happening. There's no way I'm sticking my penis in a mollusk.
There's no way this is true. Your standards are way.
You've met some of my exes. Right, okay.
Section over.
Alright, okay.
Right, 30-second
waffle.
30-second waffle.
I went first last time. I'm starting. Am I?
You just said it.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I went last time.
Yeah, I am, because I made you start last time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did too, you bastard. Like, you're trying to get one over with, over me.
Yeah.
Right, there's lots to choose from this.
There is. So this is for myself, obviously. And
this is for somebody else.
Yeah. This is for Caroline. From Esoterica Superfan.
Mm-hmm.
So the question... Okay.
Right. I love the reaction immediately. I don't even know what the question was.
Please don't start the timer yet, because it's a long...
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
It's a long
it starts at the end of the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, what's the question?
So why Sheldon Cooper's writing, I'm guessing this is in the show, was quite possibly the most perfectly written, entertaining character in TV history.
Ooh. This is something that's right up your alley. You're gonna love this. I can see the fury building already. This is brilliant. This is making my night.
I'm off for it in Handmaid's Tale. So the reason that Sheldon Cooper's writing was so stunning was because actually what the TV program did was that it brought nerd culture to the forefront. So before then, nerd culture was pathetic and it was stupid, and now it's even worse because now you have a main character that exacerbates the worst traits of nerds and makes it worse, and it exploits them, and instead you have a TV program.
You're done. You can stop now. You were,
I was so close to just
exploding. I admire how much that riled you up. And how much you tried. That really hit you where you lived, didn't it? That was
It did.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate that. I resent that question. And
I resent you. I'm walking out.
Yeah, and yeah, some of the worst writing ever.
Okay. All right. Let's see where we're going now. Okay. Oh, jeez, these are becoming novels.
They are.
This is a Discord question. This is from number one Esoterica fan. Why this saying should be followed by everyone? That's not even a word, Caroline. Remember, if you can't be an athlete, be an athlete supporter. Athletic supporter. Can you name the musical? Okay, right. So, 10 seconds to think. Okay. Right. So, I believe I can name the musical. I believe the musical off the top of my head, and although I've never seen this musical, I believe it's probably High School Musical or one of its iterations of High School Musical. Why do I think that? Because the writing is crap. If you can't be an athlete, be an athletic supporter. This is true whenever we go back to the 1800s idea and the idea of the setup of secondary schools, where there was this idea of athletic Christianity, and that what do you call it? Being physically fit, being physically healthy was as close to godliness as you could get. Boom.
Oh, nice. Nice.
No. Just no.
Nice.
I haven't seen it. I'm assuming it's High School Musical.
I think it is.
Just
That's
because
what I thought too.
That's the only thing I can think of where that quote would make sense. I've never seen it. I don't know what it is. So
I have.
Let us know in the comments if that is actually correct. The athletic Christianity thing, though, 100% true. That was a thing. Right. Okay. Where are we at?
This is from Esoterica Goblin on Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Why what?
Mm-hmm. Why?
I think it's meant to be Konami, but it's
I think it's probably like Konami. Yeah.
Yeah. Why Konami is the greatest video game company of all time.
Ooh. This is obviously somebody who's listened to the podcast last week. I'm particularly going to enjoy this, I think. Yeah.
Konami are the greatest video game company of all time because they created the franchises Silent Hill, Pro Evolution Soccer, and there's another one that I'm forgetting about, which is really, really big by Konami, but it doesn't matter because Konami are responsible for Silent Hill, which is the greatest narratively driven video game of all time, and they're responsible for that, so it's phenomenal. Capcom is Street Fighter. No, it's not Capcom. It's Konami. It doesn't matter. It's great to be here.
Konami.
What a time to be alive.
Konami was Metal Gear Solid as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
that was
Kojima. I know you were skirting around the edges of that one. I was waiting to see where you were going to go with that one.
Yeah.
So obviously somebody who listened to the podcast last week and just
yeah.
You've had some really riling questions this week.
I have.
It's just. Do you feel beaten down and just like
I honestly do. Like No, I the questions are fantastic. Like, don't get me wrong, they're very, very good questions. But I don't know. I feel like they're questions that I could, if you gave me like 30 minutes, I would absolutely like rip into Konami and like, because I was like, what did Konami produce? And the fact that I forgot about Metal Gear Solid, which is like one of my favorite, franchises of all time.
I think the thing is that too. This is the marvelous thing about it being on episode. What did we say? 29. The marvelous thing about being on episode 29 is that you can't create 29 hours worth of content without putting quite a lot of yourself out there and what your your personal pet peeves are. And as these questions come in, they start to get more and more specific and more difficult to answer. Like because they really key on things that not being like sort of broad-based questions really get into like personal pet peeves that you really feel quite strongly about. All right, cool.
All right,
let's see how we go. There's lots in there. Right, okay. This is from Esoterica Superfan from Discord again. Why saying sorry after performing an illegal act should nullify your prior action?
That is fantastic.
This is a deaning question right here. This is a deaning question. Right.
It's very good.
The act of saying sorry shows, if done properly, which is my caveat to this, shows actual remorse for the act that you have committed in the past. So a true apology or a true saying of sorry, saying that you are truly remorseful and that you accept what you have done as being wrong and as being something that you regret. If this is the case, then we should forgive you for the things that you have done.
Nice.
Boom.
Nice.
It's not true. You should do more than say sorry. Saying sorry is saying sorry is a good first step in terms of apologizing for the harm you have caused. But at the same time, the best apology that you can give somebody, and don't get me wrong, I think saying sorry to somebody is a big part of that. But the best thing that you can do is actually to prove through your actions that you are sorry and that you regret that behavior.
Actions
so you change that behavior and that you own that behavior and that sort of stuff. So it's one step in a process rather than being the be-all and end-all of that process. All right, so episode 29. We're nearly up to our next big number. So next week is going to be episode 30. 30 of this. How have we come up with this much stuff to talk about?
Well, we basically just sit down and talk, and
we go back to the plan that we made right at the beginning.
Yeah,
100 podcasts worth of episodes. 100 podcasts in a movie, isn't that what we said?
Yes, 100 podcasts in a movie, and then we cast ourselves into the sunset.
Can you imagine a movie?
I can
being in a movie.
I can.
It would be insane.
I can. I know exactly how.
You've got it planned out.
Yeah, I've got it planned out.
I see.
Yeah. So, look, thank you very much for joining us. It's been wonderful as always. I've got James here with me. Vaguely.
Yeah. Check the links down below for all of the cool places that you can come and follow us.
Do you know if are there actually links?
There are.
Below?
Producer Caroline's really good at putting all the links in the descriptions. She's really good at that.
There's fucking links, guys.
It's brilliant. You see, the wonderful thing is
but what too, you know?
No, but you see, the wonderful thing is Anthony and I just show up.
Any of our social media?
Yeah, you see. There's now actually a huge argument going on, because what happens is Anthony and I just appear and talk and then go on and do streams and stuff, and producer Caroline makes sure that everything works and people can find us and runs social media and does all of that really good stuff that Anthony and I just are really hopeless at. So there are actually links below because producer Caroline's onto it, and we're not. So come and find us on the Discord. It's always good to see people in there. Come and see us on the streams. We enjoy having you there, and it's great to interact with you. Exciting stuff coming up from Anthony soon. So actually the next one, once you see this, it'll actually be Anthony on the Wednesday, bringing you a new and exciting game.
Yes.
An old, new and exciting game, weirdly.
Yeah.
But it'll be lots of fun. So come and join us over there. Thank you very much for joining us yet again this week.
No, thank you, James.
No. Thank you.
No. Thank you.
No.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you and good luck to them.
See you next week.
See you next time you wish to listen. If you want to, you don't have to.
No pressure.
Fine. It's fine. You don't have to. It's fine. It's fine.